Hey Leggari Nation! Today we're showing you how we coated these custom-built floating shelves. They will help with the display of some of our art panels that we've coated. We wanted this wall to be similar to an art gallery. Tylor will go over how these shelves were built. We'll go over mixing, all 3 coats that are applied, and the top coat. We used our concrete overlay with black pigment to get this look. Watch exactly how we did it.
Okay guys, we're getting ready to coat this shelf. It's a floating shelf. This is kind of like our art panel wall. We're obviously going for like an art gallery look. It's really cool when the panels are up, but we wanted to have a cool floating shelf. So we had our guys build the shelf for us, and how they did it was they put a 2x4 on the wall, bolted it into the studs, and then they kind of built the frame off of that, and then they sheeted it with 3/4 inch MDF. So this is the MDF. Our seam is right here, so they put this sheet on, this sheet, butted this sheet up. We'll get under here and you guys can see kind of how it was built. So you can see the 2x4 on the wall, built the frame, and then they sheeted the outside of it. Really simple process to do floating shelves. Now we usually don't fiber tape the seams. We started doing that just because it's extra reinforcement. We don't have to worry about any of the seams of the wood cracking or when the wood expands, right? We're not gonna see a crack through the overlay. This is just fiber tape. It's mainly for like drywall, stuff like that, but it works great. Doesn't really tear, and it's got a sticky side to it. So we went around, stuck the tape down everywhere there's a seam, and then we took the all-purpose Bondo putty, and then we filled in the fiber tape, and you can kind of see we went past it, so that way we can feather it out. So when I run my hand across it, I don't really feel a lip anywhere. It's sanded smooth, it fills in the tape really well, and now we don't have to worry about a seam cracking here. And it's actually really fast to do this. When you're doing your edges, you want to stay back from your edges a little bit. We don't want the fiber tape hanging out right on our corner, so you can kind of see that's cut back a little bit. So just stay back on your edges. Same thing with here. You can wrap the corners. We didn't wrap the corner here. We stopped. And again, bondoed, feathered it out, so I can't feel anything. It's perfectly smooth. I just feel a little texture where the fiber tape is. And so this is basically ready. Sanded, cleaned it. Now the nail holes were filled. We don't necessarily need to fill the nail holes when we're doing concrete overlay because we're doing two texture coats. That's gonna fill in nail holes. They went ahead, filled those in, and again, sanded it smooth. And so wiped it clean, blew it off, and then obviously we plastic the floor because we're gonna drip some overlay. And then when we taped our back edge here, we taped it high. So we're not taped right down to the wood. It's taped about 1/4 inch high. That way the product doesn't lock the tape in and then you have to cut it out. We can simply pull this off when we're done and we'll have a nice clean line. And then the gap here, we use paintable latex caulking to seal up that gap so we don't lose overlay back there. So this is basically ready for the concrete overlay primer. And again guys, it's a floating shelf, it's cool. Obviously it goes all the way down there, so we're gonna be coating this thing with black overlay. Obviously we have the black door, black window accent. It's gonna look really nice. So for the primer, we're gonna be using our prep replacement primer, and I'm gonna go over mixing. We have a 1.5 gallon kit here. So to figure out how much you need for your projects, we times the square footage by 0.4 to 0.6. I usually do 0.6 because that's gonna account for the roller soaking it up, right? We don't have to like stretch it and have to mix more. So I always go square footage times 0.6, and that tells us how many ounces we need to make. So we have roughly on this floating shelf, 45 square feet. So we're gonna go 45, and then I'm gonna times that by 0.6. It's gonna give us 27 ounces. So I'm gonna make right around 27 ounces of the prep replacement primer. So applying it, I'm gonna use a 3/8 snap roller, de-shed it, and typically you'd want to use like a roller tray, dip and roll it. I'm just gonna pour some beads out, work sections at a time, do the top, do the bottom, and just go repeat that process all the way down. That's it, guys. So that's primer, very simple. And you can see it's already drying out. Fast cure primer. It's gonna give us great adhesion to the wood because it's soaked into the wood. And then our overlays bond extremely well to this primer too. So we can throw a fan on this, give it like maybe a half hour. So you can expect this to dry really, really quick. And we can start applying our overlay once it goes clear. So you can kind of see how it has a milky white to it in some spots. Once it's all clear, it's gonna be nice and tacky. We can apply that first coat of overlay on it right after that. So since we're using 1 bag of our texture coat for this, we have our 2.5 gallon bucket of polymer here. So 1 bag needs 2.5 gallons of liquid polymer. Our Leggari pigments, pigment 5 gallons of liquid polymer. So you would need 2 bags. So again, since we're only using 1 bag, we need to split the liquid pigment into 2, which we just did. So now we're good to go. We have our 2.5 gallons of liquid polymer here. We got our 1 bag and we have half of a Leggari pigment ready to go. So now we can mix it. So mixing's really simple. Obviously trying to mix 1 bag in a 5 gallon bucket, it's gonna be right at the top. Can you do it? Yes. It is kind of messy. It's good to kind of have 2 5 gallon buckets or a 7 gallon bucket if you can find these. If not, just grab another 5 gallon bucket, pour the polymer in there, split the bag up, and then kind of just swap them out as you're mixing until you get it thoroughly mixed, and then you can mix it in 5 gallon buckets. But again, it's a lot easier if you can get a larger bucket than 5 gallons. When we start to mix, we're gonna add the pigment into the polymer. We're gonna mix that in. Sometimes the polymers will settle in the bucket, so we want to make sure we get those mixed in. Then we're going to slowly add the bag. We're going to be wearing masks as we mix. And we're also going to have a vacuum set up to suck out any dust that comes out while we're mixing. We're going to use a mortar mixer, a corded drill, and then to apply it, we're going to use one of our Leggari squeegees that we cut down. So we just took the Leggari squeegee, we cut it down. You can even cut them so you still have the handle on them, or you can just use them this big. But we're gonna be using that to apply it, and so we'll get right into mixing. It's really simple, guys. Again, we just wanna make sure we're adding the powder slow so big old chunks aren't falling to the bottom and not getting mixed in. All right, so we're thoroughly mixed. We don't have any clumps. Mix it on the bottom row, right? 2 to 3 minutes, mix it, you'll be good to go. The next thing is, obviously, we're not gonna need this much product. So my thought is we're gonna get a coat on, throw some fans on it, try to flash dry it, get another coat on, because 1 bag will do right around 250 square feet of floor, walls, whatever you're coating, right? 250 square feet per bag. That's how much coverage rate you're gonna get. We have about 45, 50 square foot here, so we don't need nearly as much, but we just made it up. It's a lot easier to make a full bag than try to split the pigments down, try to get half a bag split up. Plus, I'm gonna try to get 2 coats on today, and this will sit in a bucket for a few hours and we can still reuse it. It'll start to thicken up, but obviously since we're inside, we're not out in the heat, it's not gonna kind of kick off as fast. So that's my thought, and I'm gonna pour out into some 5-quart containers, or maybe you guys have another 5-gallon bucket, just so we're not carrying around this full heavy bucket. So we're gonna pour some out into here. We'll be able to manage it a lot better. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour a lot of product on the top. I'm gonna use the big squeegee to catch it as it runs over, and I'm gonna be pulling it back up, and we're just gonna work down the line and coat it. So right here, we kind of have some drips, little thickened spots. So I'm just gonna simply flatten that off. And that's what we're going back and checking for. We wanna make sure we don't have any of those spots. We have a nice flat face when we're done. So last thing, guys, is scrape these bottom drips off. Okay guys, so for this one, I'm gonna be a little more messy. We're gonna waste a little more product. Obviously, if you're trying to minimize wasting product, that's the way to do it. If you're trying to do stuff fast, obviously we have plenty of product. So I'm gonna pour a bunch on here. We're gonna coat this one quick. Okay guys, so once that first coat's dry, right, it's obviously dry, and we put a fan on it, so it was took about an hour. Obviously temperature dependent. If it's really cold, it's gonna take a little longer, but having airflow will speed up the dry time. So what I'm gonna do now is just run a scraper, knock off some of the peaks from the crushed marble in the mix, and then we'll re-agitate our mix right here. It's kind of thickened up. What I'm gonna do is spin the drill in there. It'll re-agitate it. It'll make it more fluid, and then we'll just do the same exact thing. Only thing different we're doing on this coat is when we do our finish passes with the squeegee, I'm gonna go random directions so it has a random chatter pattern, and then that way when we sand it and scratch coat, it'll have a really random pattern to it instead of, you know, straight lines or pulling off the wall in one area. We want just a random texture, and we'll go over that when I do it. But first thing, scraper, we're just gonna run it, and you'll see all the stuff it kind of knocks off. It's all the crushed marble peaks. All right guys, next thing, like I said, we're gonna re-agitate the mix. If it sits in a bucket, it'll kind of it'll just get thicker. You can kind of see how thick it is. Once we re-agitate that, it's gonna make it nice and fluid. And one more thing I wanna point out is you wanna coat the overlay over that primer right when it goes clear. If you wait too long, it'll set up and become a sealed surface. To give me more working time, obviously going over a sealed surface, it's not porous, it's not gonna suck the polymers, the moisture out of the concrete overlay. But now that we have a porous surface because we have that first coat on, it's gonna wanna suck all the moisture, the polymers out of this second coat. And to minimize that, to give us more working time, we're gonna hydrate the overlay. That way it's pre-hydrated, the concrete, the porosity of it is saturated, is satisfied with the moisture, so it's not gonna suck any of the moisture out, which is gonna give us more working time with the product. If we tried to go over it dry like this, it's gonna immediately suck the moisture out, and this is gonna become thick, tacky. It's gonna be really hard to spread out. So what we always like to do, we call it pre-hydrate. So I'll just go along. We don't want standing water in puddles. I'm just gonna pre-hydrate this whole ledge. And then as we're going, if I notice it's starting to suck out the moisture of the mix, we'll add more water and hydration. But you can kind of see I just sprayed this and it's kind of already drying out. So you can imagine what that will do to that mix as we're trying to coat it. And I'm just gonna get this coated quick. We're gonna lose some product on the ground, but that's all right. All right, so like I said, we're gonna work in sections, and then once I get everything flattened off, I'm just gonna pull different directions off the wall, just random patterns. Real quick, same thing on the face, random directions. Always try to start on a corner, on an edge. We just want a random pattern. You can kind of see if I pull it straight, we have all these lines. Well, unless you do that everywhere, maybe one time you pull up, you're gonna mess up that pattern, and you'll notice that once we sand it and scratch coat it. So easiest way is to just do a random pattern. It'll look nice and uniform, and you won't have any of the same chatter marks anywhere. So that's it, guys. That section's done, and we'll just kind of repeat that process. And again, if I need to add more hydration, I'll do that. If the surface starts to dry out too quick, But again, I'm just kind of putting it on thick, letting it coat that face by itself. It's going to be a lot faster. All right, so for the next step, guys, we're gonna be using our scratch coat material. It doesn't have any aggregate in it. It's almost like a flour. It's gonna fill in all the low spots from that texture coat. So what we did before this, obviously we wanna sand. We wanna sand and get a flat profile. So we sanded this whole surface, palm sander, used 120 grit. We sanded our corners by hand, right? We don't wanna sand through, but obviously having two coats, it's gonna be hard to sand through this, so we use 120 grit, palm sanded the top, palm sanded the faces, and what that does is it knocks all the peaks down and creates a flat surface. That way we can have our trowel glide on all the flat surface peaks, and it's gonna fill in all these lower, darker spots, and that's what's gonna create our smooth, concrete-like finish. So this is ready, sanded, cleaned. We will be hydrating on this as well because, again, we have a porous surface. We wanna minimize the material getting sucked out into this coat, and then that eliminates our working time. So we're gonna mix the same exact way we did the texture coat. We're just using our scratch coat now. Again, that doesn't have the crushed marble aggregate in it. It's more like a flour, and we're gonna use our other half of the color pack that we have, the Leggari pigment in black. Same thing, 2.5 gallon of polymer, 1 bag, and then half of these Leggari pigments. So we'll mix it the same way. We'll get that mixed up, and then we'll show you how to apply the scratch coat. All right, guys, materials mixed, so we're ready to start applying it. But again, we want to pre-hydrate like we did on that second texture coat because we don't want the polymers, the moisture getting sucked out of this mix. That's going to eliminate how much working time we have with it. So I'm going to go around, just spray it all again, pre-hydrate this surface. Again, we just do not want standing puddled water. That'll thin out this mix way too much, and it won't be as flat in those areas. For this, we're gonna use metal scrapers, putty knives, whatever you wanna call these. We're gonna just do it the same way. Get the top, run it down the edge. I'm gonna just let it drip off. That way I can coat this a lot faster than trying to not make a mess. I don't want to leave like scratch marks in it, so I'm just gonna take a piece of plastic, and that's how I'll kind of fine tune my edge. I'll just fold it in half here, and then I can just kind of run over it. But again, you gotta hit it at the right time. It's okay if you miss the timing, you just can kind of sand it by hand, 220 grit. I'm gonna go over mixing the top coat. We're gonna be doing our matte urethane on this. Dry times for the scratch coat are a little faster than the texture coat just because it's a lot thinner and you're just scratching the surface with this. So we put fans on it. Took about half hour, 45 minutes for that to dry enough to be able to top coat. Texture coats can take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, and obviously all that's temperature dependent. Obviously the colder it is, the longer it's gonna take to dry out. And if you can put a fan, get some airflow going across the surface, that's gonna speed dry the product as well. I got a floor WB urethane primer kit here. If you guys are just coating small stuff, you can just buy our concrete overlay countertop kits on Leggari.com. Those will cover 50 square feet. So theoretically, we could have used a countertop kit to coat all these, and we wouldn't have extra material left over. If you guys have other projects, maybe you have 80, 120, 180 square feet, whatever it is, you can buy in bulk off the store. So you can buy the bags like we did, the polymers, the primers, all that stuff. But since we've been using bigger kits, we're just gonna keep going that route. But just remember, if you want smaller projects, check out the countertop overlay kits. Those will cover 50 square foot per kit. So to apply it, guys, I'm gonna use a 3/8 snap roller. Make sure you de-shed these. And it's always good to use a roller tray, dip and roll. But since this is kind of small, little small sections, right? We got a small top, small face. I'm gonna just dump some out, roll it out real quick. It's gonna go really fast. And the mats are very forgiving. We just wanna do sections at a time, right? I don't wanna dump a bead all the way down the top. It'll start to crust over on the edge, and then you're gonna have issues with the top coat. So I'm gonna do like 4-foot sections, 3-foot sections, and just finish it and move on down the line. If you guys have any imperfections, stuff that needs sanded, obviously you're gonna wanna hit that before you top coat.